Welcome to the 30-Minute Hour. It's the personal development podcast for entrepreneurs who are looking to level up and become unstoppable. I'm your host, Eric Twiggs, your procrastination prevention partner. So now, normally joining me, you know my co-host, he's the super CEO, the business strategist extraordinaire, and all-around good guy. Well, he's not here today. This is a rare episode where I don't have my partner in crime with me, Ted Fells. He is out at a charity golf tournament raising money for a great cause. And I think I was just telling Tim and Scott, with Tim backstage, I think he's thankful that I'm not with him because my golf balls would be all over the place. It would probably be embarrassing. So I told him I'm just going to go ahead and donate financially to support the cause. And Scott, he didn't argue or push back. I think he's seen me play golf before. So
I like it. That's awesome.
Yeah, everybody got to stay in their lane. That's right. So Ted is not joining us. You're getting just me and my awesome and amazing guests. And their story is really interesting. The theme of our show is how to launch a 7-figure idea. We're going to get into that, but you need to know this is not your everyday podcast. I don't think I really warned Tim and Scott properly that, we do things a little different here on the 30-Minute Hour. But you can definitely check us out live. You can check us out on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube by just typing in the 30-Minute Hour in the search field and finding our page. And then later we go back and edit it and we put it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all of the audio platforms for those of you that like to listen to while you're on the treadmill and driving around and all that good stuff. So you have the option to be able to check us out in those places. But again, we are here today to talk about how to launch a 7-figure idea. So you ever watch TV? And I know this has happened to me, and maybe our guests can kind of get into this once we start talking to them. But you see a product and you're like, you know what? I could have thought of that. Or, yeah, you know what? I actually had that idea. Well, these guys are actually implementing the ideas that they get. They're actually bringing it to life. And they've done this before, and they've joined forces to do it again. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. We're going to start having this conversation. So they're close friends and they're serial entrepreneurs in the toy and game space. And they have a passion for outdoor sports. Their worlds collided when they were introduced to the PaddleSmash inventor, Joe Bingham. And after playtesting his concept with family and friends, they immediately fell in love with the game and they knew it was going to be a hit. So they went and quickly created a version of PaddleSmash that's durable, portable, and ready for the masses. So please join me in welcoming to the 30-Minute Hour podcast, Tim Swindle and Scott Brown.
All right. Thank you, Eric. Woo! I didn't know if there was
thank you for having us.
Crowd noise or what? So
yeah,
I imagine.
should we clap for ourselves? Yeah.
For ourselves.
Now, nice I'm actually thinking of adding some crowd noise. We got to take this to the next level here. But now, guys, welcome to the show, and I've been looking forward to this ever since we had our initial conversation. I was just blown away by both of your individual stories. So can you do me a favor? We'll start with you, Tim. Can you just go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience as far as what your background and what you were doing prior to you getting to this point?
Yeah, sure. So prior to getting in the toy and game space, I was actually in software, a software entrepreneur. We were creating a sales software, more of a B2B software, but it was a venture-backed company. We had raised a ton of capital. We had a big team. We were burning a ton of cash. It was really stressful. And while doing that, I decided as like a nights and weekends side hustle project, I was going to launch this card game, a board game. I'd read an article in Inc. magazine that had laid out the blueprint for how a really popular party game called Cards Against Humanity had come to light. And I found that really interesting because there was a game that I had been playing with friends and family on the weekends at, lake houses and whatnot. And I said, hey, you know what? I think I could, with my spare time, create this game and take it to the market. And so I did that. I did a little Kickstarter campaign. It didn't go crazy on Kickstarter like you see some of these. It just, we hit our funding goal, but it was our first win and it got the ball rolling. And through that, I ultimately met Scott. Scott had, I'll let him get into, his side of the story, but really it was kind of on a whim that I put this board game out there that I wanted to do, kind of like I said, as a side hustle for fun. And now it's become my full-time job is creating toys and games. That game, the software company ended up selling. We sold that to LinkedIn. The board game company also, after coming out with a couple different versions and getting into like Target and Walmart and Barnes and Noble, ultimately was sold as well to a private equity-backed toy and game company. So, so now I'm working on what's next, and I'm partnered up with Scott, and I'll let him kind of give you his background.
I want to stop right here. And Scott, we'll give you a chance to introduce yourself. But Tim, can you please tell the story about how you got to the shelves of Target with your board game?
Sure. So let me just think here of the version I need to tell you. So, all right. So when I launched the game, I had it was just myself. At a time, I had a business partner, and we were both working full-time jobs. And my sister at the time, she was working. She was not working. She was not working. And so to give her a little cash, I was like, hey, do me a favor and start reaching out to some of the different people, publications, whatever, that may want to cover our game that we just launched. So she does that, and she ends up getting us published gets an article written about us in it was called Toy and Game News UK, United Kingdom. And we didn't sell our game in the United Kingdom. So I was not impressed with this, with us getting in this article. And I was like, great work. Who's going to read that? That's going to buy this game. Well, it turns out the buyer from Target reads Toy and Game News UK. He's someone that reads those types of publications. And so through that, and then simultaneously, as I mentioned, Scott's company, Scott had really created like a really good brand with his retail stores for finding kind of like new niche, cool up and coming concepts. So I think, and I'd mentioned that in this article. And so the buyer would happen to be familiar with Scott's company. So it was like, I had this one social proof point where, a couple, we launched on Kickstarter, we got funded. We were, being carried in Scott's stores. And then this article came out, and it caught the eye of the Target buyer. And so unlike quite frankly, since then, any experience I've had, Target reached out to me, which is normally it's the other way around. And you're really having to chase them to give you a conversation. And so lo and behold, this buyer just really was into the game and into the concept and wanted us in the stores. And so that's kind of the background story.
Like, I still remember that. I was telling Ted Fells, my co-host, that, and he was blown away. And we both know someone who went through the process of getting on the shelves of Target, and the fact that you had it in a magazine that you didn't even think was going to do anything, and all of a sudden this guy sees it and reaches out to you, and it was a life-changing thing, right?
It was, yeah. It was a big deal, yeah. Because from there, then it gives the confidence to everyone's kind of looking at each other for who's carrying what, right? So Barnes and Noble, Walmart, they're looking at Target. Oh, they've got this new thing. So it just helps kind of elevate your status. I use the term social proof a lot, and there's a lot of different ways you could do that. But having a retailer carry your game is a big way of showing social proof that it's a good product.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight that. And then Scott, we're definitely going to let you tell us about your background, but I just wanted to take time to highlight it while it was top of mind, because we have people that are watching us that have an idea, and you're putting things out and you feel like you're doing the right things. You just never know how close you are to that breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
You just never know. I just hopefully
you never know. Yeah. And sorry, did you want to finish? Or
no, go ahead.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point, because I talk a lot about you need to increase your surface area of luck. You never know really where that's going to come from. And so for us, it's doing the things you may not think could turn into something, right? I mean, there's tons of examples that we have personally. I also, we like to share the example of a competitor of ours, actually, a game called CrossNet, which again, they were starting out trying to get traction, really weren't going anywhere. Their product is kind of like a version of a volleyball game. And lo and behold, the Latvian volleyball team played their game, and they have a pretty big YouTube channel apparently. And they posted about themselves playing on their YouTube channel. In the game, that was like the first big spark that CrossNet got. And it was like, who knew? Like you could never guess that in a million years. So my advice to entrepreneurs is like, you just got to put yourself out there, just put yourself out there and just stir the pot and hopefully, luck will find you just by doing that. I
like how you said that. Increase your surface area of luck. That's fantastic. Stay encouraged, entrepreneurs that are watching this. I see we've got people coming on. Make sure you comment in the comment section. All right, Scott, please tell us your story of how you got to this point.
I mean, neither of us planned to get into the toy industry. We just both sort of lucked into it. And it kind of, this might be the theme of the podcast is you kind of luck into things if you spread out the surface area of luck. So the way I fell into it was I was recruited into a venture capital backed firm hiring entrepreneurs in residence in Chicago. It was called Sandbox Industries. They were hiring young entrepreneurs. So none of us were true entrepreneurs at that point. We all just aspired to be. And they were giving us office space and encouraging us to come with ideas. And one of the things I loved that I've kind of taken with me since then was that they asked us to write our ideas on these paper cutout goldfish and then put them on a wall. And then we would evaluate them as a group, kind of like Shark Tank. So you'd present your idea to the group would evaluate and critique. And the reason for the goldfish is that you wanted an idea that you weren't so protective of, that you treated it like a pet that you loved so much that you would be afraid to let anything happen to it. So a goldfish is the type of pet that if anything happens to it, it's sad but not devastating. And so that's the way we had to treat our ideas. Is we like them, but if we had to let them go, it was sad but not devastating. And so that's the context for when we came up. With a group of people came up with the idea for a brain health store. And so the idea was, hey, people are concerned about their brain health. They don't know quite what to do about it. What if we were to aggregate into one spot all of the best products out there to improve your brain health? And we did that. We actually decided to kind of do a test and learn. We opened as a kiosk initially, used that kind of learning to open a downtown location in Chicago, just off the Magnificent Mile. Again, kind of lucked into it. This was right in the midst of the fall of 2008, which was the start of a recession. And, not a great time probably to start a business, but the lucky part was that there was a vacancy at a high traffic mall. They invited us to take that space for the fourth quarter that year. We, on a very tight budget, opened a location, and it was kind of like out of the gate, a lot of success, lots of traffic in the store, lots of positive feedback. And we used that to continue to grow. And over 10 years, we opened 40 stores and became kind of a well-known concept in the toy and game industry, a rising star. And what we were known for more than anything was we were almost a Kickstarter for new concepts. And so I was always on the lookout for the kind of newest and greatest out there that we could help launch. And really, I was looking for up-and-comers like Tim. I didn't want the big brands. Those big brands are easy to find at mass market retail. So I was looking for someone that maybe it was their first go. So I was introduced to Tim, and I'm like, Tim, this is it. Like, this is perfect. We put it in our stores. We demonstrate live demonstration of everything we sell, and it gives a product a really great proving ground for whether or not it can work. And so anyway, fast forward, sold my business off to a big Canadian toy and game company, but vowed to work with Tim again. There was something about kind of the connection I felt with him, the way he was being scrappy about his marketing, I really appreciate. We clicked really from the get-go, and we vowed to work together at some point. But it was like, all right, we both learned a lot in these last few years. What are we going to do next? And one of the things we really wanted to do was kind of upset the balance of how it traditionally has worked with getting a product into the marketplace. Historically, you've been reliant on primarily two mass market players, Target and Walmart, to get a game off the ground in a significant way. And so you are basically creating a product and then begging, just hoping. Tim's experience is an anomaly. It's awesome. It's lucky in all the great ways because he kind of did what he needed to do to be lucky. But it's such a level of luck that we kind of both looked at each other and said, well, do we want to just cross our fingers and hope, or do we want to set ourselves up so that so that's more than just luck? And so what we kind of vowed to do was to build a brand that we would launch initially direct to consumer, whatever that brand would be. It was let's find something that we can launch direct to consumer first. And so the task was, before we even found what we're working on, the task was, let's find something that has enough tailwinds behind it that we can launch direct to consumer and have success without being reliant on a brick and mortar mass market shelf.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great story. I mean, it's clear now how your two paths kind of collided at that point. I did want to go back to where you talked about the goldfish concept, because I think that's how you should treat all your ideas. I think it's dangerous to kind of get married to any idea that you have. So it sounds like that's what you think too, that should be if you're looking to bring something into the world and get the best ideas, you should have the goldfish concept where, yeah, you're sad, but not devastated if it doesn't work out. Can you talk more about that, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was lucky to have been taught that lesson really early, because I've learned since then how rare it is that an inventor, someone starting a business, how rare it is for them to be able to detach themselves from their idea. You want to have passion, and you want to champion your idea, but you have to do it in a way that you're getting as honest to feedback as possible. So I found myself in a spot when I was helping run this chain of retail stores where inventors were constantly coming to me with their concepts and pitching me their idea. And I'd say the biggest red flag for me was when an inventor said, I've shown this to my friends and family and they love it. That meant nothing to me. And in fact, it was actually a warning flag that that's all the inventor had done for proof of concept. And I would say the biggest advice I would have for those inventors, and have for anyone looking to kind of get their idea out there, is to find a way to present your concept that you're going to get feedback that is honest and true. And the best way I've found to do that, it's just a small little trick, is that when you're presenting the idea, you present it as if it's someone else's. So an example here is, we've got this concept that we're working on right now called PaddleSmash. We'll get to the story of how we found that idea, but the quick version of how we tested it was Tim flew in from Chicago to test it with me. And we went down to the local pickleball courts to show it off, set up the game, and immediately people were coming over to see more about it. But the way we presented it was not, hey, this is our idea. Can you tell us whether this is good or not? If we would have presented it that way, I am 1,000% positive we would have gotten 100% positive feedback. Just positive, because people don't want to hurt your feelings. So instead we said, someone sent us this idea. We're trying to decide if this is good or not. Can you help us try this thing out? And it drops people's guards. It drops their kind of hesitancy to share honest and open feedback. And immediately we were getting helpful feedback. It was on the whole still positive, which for us kind of was validating, but it was honest and open. And they didn't feel like they were hurting our feelings or at risk of doing that. So that's just kind of generally, I would recommend that to anyone presenting their idea. Whenever I'm testing a new board game concept, I always say, can you guys come over to my house and help me evaluate a concept that an inventor sent me? Later, I might tell them it was mine, but I never start that way. So that's kind of overarching. The goldfish idea is, you want to never treat your idea in a way that people are afraid of killing it. You don't want to make them feel afraid of killing your idea. You need to make them feel like this is a goldfish that was sent to you from someone else, and we all can just be kind of as harsh as we need to be with this goldfish to decide if it's a really healthy goldfish.
That is great advice. I mean, I think that doesn't just apply to like a board game. That applies to like when I was writing my book titles, book covers, really not getting so attached to which you think is such a brilliant idea, but being open to honest feedback that can really move you forward. Thank you for sharing that, Scott. So before we get into the backstory of how you got the PaddleSmash and all that, I do want to go back, starting with Tim. Like, if you could go back to your startup version, like when you first started out as a serial entrepreneur, with the knowledge that you have now, like what's the one piece of advice that you would give to yourself?
This is going to sound cheesy, but it's like, believe in yourself. I have a lot of self-doubt. Really? And I think because of the self-doubt, I took a lot longer to do things, to believe in myself that I could do it and move forward with, if I had an idea that I would pursue it. And so I would just say, it's a way of like, I need to instill confidence in my younger self, that like, I'm reminded of the SNL skit, Stuart Smalley. It's like, you're good enough, you're smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like you. It's like, I needed to hear that. Yep, when I was younger.
No, that I think the belief is critical. I mean, that's you guys know. I mean, you have to be operating at a certain level.
Because you're kind of crazy, right? Like you're going to go start a company or whatever and like launch a product. You have no idea if it's going to work and you're going to spend all this time and money. So like, it makes sense, right? That you wouldn't necessarily believe in yourself, I guess, right. But you just got to do it.
Absolutely. And that's great. All right, Scott.
I think mine dovetails with Tim's. I think the best thing to do when you're trying to start up is to just start. And you just got to start somehow, some way. It's really easy. And in fact, I'd say if I were to reflect back on kind of the early stages of my career, I have a million ideas. That is not the hard part for me. I have a creative brain, a million ideas. Where I struggled, especially early on, was knowing what to do with them. And so I would sit there and just noodle them and try and figure out the best way to start this thing. And kind of in that process, I'd never quite move anywhere. It would just sort of like tread water in one spot. I was really blessed with a co-founder of Marbles, that she was a starter. She was like, we had this idea, and within a week we had a kiosk at a local mall. Like she just went for it and didn't have any fear of kind of these little failures along the way. Because the big lesson I've learned is no matter how much preparation you put into something, there will always be the little failures along the way. And you sort of just have to embrace those as you go. I think the biggest risk is actually that you wait so long that you never progress. And then the idea either gets knocked off or it runs out of money or you lose your passion for it. So if you just start going, you'll find out a lot along the way. And I think we've really implemented that with this product that we're working on now. We just sort of like, all right, we like it. Now let's go. And we've been going really for the last year, just like going, making mistakes along the way. Tons of mistakes that we shouldn't have made because we are experienced enough, but we made them because we're moving at a pace that kind of mistakes invariably happen. But I don't regret those because the pace is what gets us to market and it's what gets the product into the world.
Awesome. Just start. So now with the two of you, as you work together, is one person like the visionary and the other person more of like that integrator / implementer, or like, how does that work? What's the dynamic like between the two of you on that?
So if we're like a mullet, I would be like the business in the front and Scott's the party in the back. So Scott, as you mentioned, is incredibly creative. And I'd say maybe a more appropriate analogy would be like, Scott's going to be more front of house. I'm more back of house, a little more task oriented. I'm a little more task oriented, more operations, call it. And Scott's a little more, just leading from the front with marketing and sales and vision and things like that.
Good.
To be fair, Tim is very creative as well. So I'm lucky to have someone that's good at both of those. But no, I think if we're generalizing, that's how it kind of tends to fall, is into those two camps. And like, if there's any advice I would have to myself as well, is find a partner that's like that. Yeah, for me, I'm not a good solo entrepreneur. I'm better in a partnership. I would say, like, probably just in just two people. It gets bigger than that, and I start to get frustrated by the slowness of it all. But with just two of us, I really love the kind of accountability and balance that we have.
Excellent. Excellent. We're talking to Tim Swindle and Scott Brown, serial entrepreneurs extraordinaire. So let's get the backstory, and I'll throw it to you, Tim, as far as how you guys came involved with PaddleSmash. Starting with you, Tim.
Yeah, sure. So the story starts with a gentleman by the name of, well, let me actually, hold on. I'm going to go even a little bit further back. So what Scott and I do sometimes is we do brainstorm sessions, and we try to think of, cool concepts and next kind of project that we want to take on. And, we see kind of trends happening in the marketplace, and have our ears attuned to what's going on with social media and just different online trends and whatnot. And one that's like super popular right now is pickleball. Pickleball is the fastest growing sport in America, and it's just growing like crazy. Scott happens to be a huge pickleball player, and so we were just trying to we noodled around this idea of pickleball and like what could we do in that space. And for those who don't know, pickleball, it's basically like ping pong meets tennis. It's just a more approachable version of like tennis, basically. And so we actually sketched up like this concept of what we wanted to do, where it was like a circular platform that had a net around it that you could kind of hit down on and hit the ball down on. So anyway, this thing on paper, that's all it was for us. We were one of those, it was just an idea on paper. Lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, Scott randomly was introduced to a gentleman by the name of Joe Bingham. Joe lives in Oregon, lives in Utah, lives in Ogden, Utah. Is that where I was getting it confused? And he has 7 kids. He's a structural engineer by trade. So he's just a really creative brain of his own with his engineering mind. And he loves, him and his family love playing pickleball. And they play a lot, but there's also the issue right now where courts are 20 minutes away. They're always crowded. And, he's like, gosh, I want something I can just play in our backyard, but I can't build a pickleball court in my backyard. Well, between his love of pickleball and another sport that the family used to love playing called spikeball, again, a very popular outdoor backyard game, probably the most popular for the past 10 years. He kind of took these two concepts and combined them. And he created something that was very similar to what Scott and I actually had been noodling on weeks prior. But he actually went and did something with it. So that's an important point there, is he didn't just think about it, he took action. And he's familiar with using a CNC machine, a router, and different products. And he just kind of took them in and glued big pieces of plastic together and bought a net and whatever. He just kind of Frankenstein this thing together and was able to play it with his family and refined it over a number of years. And they had a great game that all their friends and family and neighbors and stuff loved playing. And he just didn't know what to do with it. And so that's kind of where we came in. Is Scott was introduced to Joe through a mutual connection, and he first saw it, Scott first saw it, and then I was paused there, and that's kind of how we got started with PaddleSmash. So it's actually not our idea. We licensed it from Joe, but we kind of knew what we were looking for in a sense, and when we saw it, it was something that we were really excited about.
Yeah, it's great. Go ahead, Scott.
I just wanted to add 2 things that I think are really important there. I think there were, call it two obstacles there, or 2 opportunities where both sides could have gotten greedy and stopped this thing from happening. So I'd say Joe on his side, once he heard from us that we really loved his idea, I think he could have very easily gotten greedy and said, great, I'm just going to do it myself. We could have said, hey, Joe, glad you figured this thing out. We were already thinking about this ourselves, And we could have gotten greedy and said, we're just going to keep doing the thing that we were already working on. We're not going to license it from you. But we both chose to work together. Joe, I think, was really wise in recognizing his shortcomings. He doesn't know how to get a thing made beyond making a prototype. He doesn't know how to work with an overseas partner. He doesn't know how to make it mass market ready. We do. And Joe saw that in us. And then on our side, Joe had 2 years of working through the kinks of an idea before we met him. And so, yeah, we had something sketched on a napkin, but we knew what was ahead of us, which is probably at least a year's worth of working through kinks before we could have gotten to where Joe was. Maybe seeing Joe's would have fast forwarded us a little bit, but we didn't have that same kind of base of play testing that Joe had. I think we both just looked at each other and said, this is a partnership. This, like, almost we were meant to be put together. We know how to do something you don't know how to do. You figured out how to do something we didn't know how to do. Let's put it together and create something.
No, that's interesting. So Scott, I mean, was it ready to go as is, or did you guys have to take the idea and tweak it a little bit, or you just basically your thing was just getting it out to the market?
In some ways it was ready. And I'd say in the ways it was ready, he had the net figured out, the right angle of the net. He had the gameplay roughly figured out, but I'd say it was probably, let's call it 60% there. We still had a lot of work to do. And especially from the kind of how to produce this thing and how to manufacture it in a way that is replicable, affordable, and presentable on a mass market shelf. And so Joe didn't know how to do that. We both did. I used to run a chain of retail stores. Tim's worked with mass market retail. We knew what would be required. And one thing that would be required would be something that was small enough to fit on a shelf comfortably. So Joe's product was at least 50 pounds, number one. And number two, it was like 4 feet in diameter. It was huge. And it was so heavy to carry around. There is zero chance that would have made it into a mass market location. There's no way. And so what we had to figure out how to do was take what Joe had figured out was the right bounce, kind of the right heft, the kind of right density of plastic, and make that much lighter weight. And that's been the hardest part of this project so far, honestly. That was a ton of back and forth with a US-based engineering firm and with a China-based factory. Over the course of, call it 8 months, there was back and forth trying to figure this thing out. We ultimately, this is kind of an interesting thing, is we kept missing the mark on that. They kept sending us samples and we would bounce it, and it would bounce at half the height of Joe's prototype. Well, Joe had really thick plastic. So our question was, can you thin up that plastic and still get that same bounce? What we ended up doing was going to Home Depot, and we found a plastic workbench that was thin plastic but had the same bounce. We were like in the aisles of Home Depot bouncing a pickleball on different plastic workbenches. We finally found one that had the bounce, and we just took photos of the underside of that and sent it to our factory and said, do this. And that was the unlock for us. They were able to kind of replicate that workbench. It thinned up the plastic enough that it was light, much, much lighter weight. And it allowed us then also to create a base that could fold in half and would store all the components inside like a suitcase. That meant it would fit on a retail shelf, and it meant that it was portable for the end user. So no, it wasn't ready in that sense. And it took us a ton of work to get it ready. But that's what Tim and I are good at. We're good at working through those obstacles. It is a hard thing to do. And it's really, I'm guessing that's the spot where most people quit. When you're making physical product, is when you start to try and work through these manufacturing challenges, especially when you're working with an overseas factory, it is really easy to feel hopeless and helpless. But we've both done it enough. I think I've come out with 160 products that I just know that's going to happen. And I'm like, well, dang, here we are. The same thing that happens in every single project is like, you feel like it's not going to go forward. Well, we'll get through it. We always do. And we did. We just kept pushing. We got through it.
See, I'm glad I asked that question, because I just assumed that, you had the inventor, you had the concept, and you guys are gifted at getting it out into the market, but there was a whole lot more to it than that. And I could see how a lot of people wouldn't take the extra time to get the bounce right. And some of the other things wouldn't want to do that. So thank you for sharing that. I'm really glad I asked that question. So Tim, kind of back to you. Can you just kind of give a brief summary as far as how the game is played? I know we talked about pickleball a little bit. I want to make sure, people watching understand what the game's about, because I know they're going to want to purchase it and all that good stuff.
Yeah, sure. So the easiest way to explain is that it's pickleball meets spike ball. And so what that means is we play the game with pickleball paddles, which is like a big version of a ping pong paddle. And then the ball is like a wiffle ball, basically. And then it's played down on a hard surface. So the court is like a hexagonal shape, and it's roughly 3 feet wide, something like that, with a net system kind of that goes up around it. It almost looks, I don't know, like a UFO, and it's all set up with this like net going around it. And so you typically play, we like 2-on-2 the best. And it's basically bump, set, smash with your partner. So you serve it in, and then the receiving team tries to bump, set, smash it back onto the court. And then you go back and forth until someone doesn't get it back over the net. So the rules, again, if somebody's familiar with spike ball, it's kind of similar to that. We've tweaked things a little bit just to make it a little more friendly for gameplay. But that's just the quick and dirty of what it is and how you play it.
Okay, good. Now, thank you for that. So Scott, back to you. You've touched on this, but I just, so there's an entrepreneur that's watching us right now, and they've got an idea. So what do you recommend? What advice do you give to that entrepreneur that's got an idea for something right now? What steps should he or she take to validate that idea?
Start talking about it. I mean, start talking about it immediately to everyone you know. We've talked about the goldfish idea, so talk about it in a way that people will share their honest feedback, but talk about it. One of the big warning flags for me as well is when someone asks me if I'll sign an NDA. And I get it. I get the kind of concerns about getting copied. Everyone feels like their idea is so precious, and they're so worried about it being copied. But I'd say when you have that mentality at the very starting stages of an idea, you need to check yourself, because everyone has ideas. Ideas are a dime a dozen. Ideas are goldfish. You need to find out if this idea is good, and you need to do it in a way where you are blasting that out to everyone you come into contact with. So chat with someone in the grocery store checkout line about your idea. Chat with friends and family. Chat with people that you love, and chat with people you don't like as well. Like, ask everyone, figure out ways to bring it up in conversation. This is something that just over and over, I could tell the difference between inventors based on whether or not they asked for an NDA to be signed. And almost without fail, when they expected an NDA to be signed, their idea never progressed the way I thought it should. Never advanced because they weren't getting the friction that they needed to help shape their product. It's like that kind of rough stone that kind of over the course of time, the stream running over it softens it up, softens the edges. Well, that's what your idea needs to be. It's a rough idea. It needs that friction going over it over and over and over again to help it take the shape it needs to take. That might mean that your idea takes on an entirely new shape. It probably will and probably should. And that you miss out on if you're protecting and hiding your idea.
No, I think that's great. So Tim, what would you add to that?
I concur. That's my same feedback. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm very aligned with Scott's feelings on that one.
No, I think that's important to talk to. Like, even for me, like when I was testing out new material that I was going to be speaking about, like I would just have conversations, like especially if it was something that I was supposed to be funny, I would just start talking to people about it. And then if people just laughed, I knew, okay, that's the way to go. But I think that whole thing is, that validation part is critical, and getting feedback and talking to people. And we always say that the audience is, I always believe the audience is never wrong when it comes to those types of things. You can be in love with your concept, but if the niche market that you're trying to target is saying something else, I think they're right. So
yeah, they are.
This has been a fantastic conversation. So we're now at the part of the program where it's called Write This Down, right? We're each going to go around and leave at least one idea from today's episode that we want the entrepreneur that's watching us to write down so they can level up. So Tim, we'll start with you. What's at least one idea from today's show that you want the people to write down?
I'm going to go with my surface area of luck comment from earlier. So you really need to get out there, spread the word, try new things, be aggressive, and you just never know. I mean, like right now, we're trying to get into retailers, and I spent, the weekend pinging people on LinkedIn that I don't know, just writing cold blind LinkedIn outreach, notes. And lo and behold, somebody got back to me. This was the one that I reached out to was actually a couple of weeks ago. So like 4 weeks later, the guy that I wanted to get in front of actually reached out back to me. And on a whim, I was just there searching through buyers at this particular retailer. I didn't know specifically who the one was that we were trying to reach. I think I reached out to like 20 of them. And if you don't make that effort, you're not going to get that type of response, that potential win. And so I think, increase your surface area of luck by just putting yourself out there in a lot of different ways.
Definitely write that down. Increase your surface area of luck. Keep putting yourself out there. No, that's great. Scott?
I mean, I think it's got to be ideas are like goldfish. You need to have that mentality around your ideas that you're not so protective of them, that you're devastated if they have to be changed or if they die. Some ideas should die. You just have to put yourself out there and let the audience determine whether it should or shouldn't. You might get enough. You might put it out there and just disagree with everyone and still go forward with it. Well, so be it. More power to you. But I think it is critical that you put it out there like it's a goldfish. Let people rough it up, and then you can really determine whether it's something you want to put your time, energy, and money into.
Ideas are like goldfish. No, I think that's great. Okay. So my piece for this Write This Down segment is it's pretty simple for people to write down. You just never know who's watching. You never know. Like every now and then we'll put something out and somebody comments that I know, and I had no idea they're following us. And it turns out they've been following us for years, and I had no idea. So just because the person, they may not like, they may not comment, they may not share, they may not retweet, but they're watching. And you only need one. And that one person can change the trajectory of your business, can change the trajectory of your life. So knowing that should encourage somebody to stay consistent and to stay with it, even if you feel like it may not be working. You just never know who's watching. I mean, we have Tim's example. He had no idea that the target buyer was reading this magazine. You just never know. You just have to stay encouraged, and you have to stay consistent. Write that down. Man, I'm telling you, this conversation was one I've been looking forward to, and it's exceeded my expectations. So I know that our entrepreneur followers are getting a lot out of this. So what's the best way that people can connect with you to get a hold of PaddleSmash?
Well, I think two ways. So if they want to get a hold of us directly, they can just use our email. It's email@paddlesmash.com. If you have something you would like to connect with us about, that's a great way to do it. If you want to buy our product, which we would love, you can go to paddlesmash.com. We didn't talk about this beforehand, Eric, but we'd love to offer your listeners a discount code. Is that something we can do?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think Eric20 would be a good discount code. So if customers use the code ERIC20, no spaces, they'll get $20 off their purchase.
All right.
So, yeah. So that's something we're just trying to get the word out now. And this is a game we really, really believe in. I hope you can feel that during this. But this is like a train. It takes a long time to get that train moving, but once you get it moving, it stays moving. We're in that getting it moving stage, and we need all of your help out there. So if this game looks fun to you, we would really appreciate your support. So use discount code Eric20 and we'll get you $20 off.
Eric20. And it came out, was it early September when you officially launched?
Yeah, just about, I'll call it a month ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Definitely make sure you go to the PaddleSmash site. Make sure you use that discount Eric20. So certainly want to thank both Tim Swindle and Scott Brown for sharing all they shared and providing that inspiration that they provided. And speaking of sharing, don't forget to share the show. Don't keep us a secret. Share the show.
Share the show, people.
Share the show.
That's right. I was waiting on Tim to say share the show. All right, good. So we're good now. But now definitely share the show. I mean, these guys, they some great content. If you're just joining us, you're just listening, this is the episode you want to hit the rewind button and go back and listen and get some of those nuggets that they left us. Again, this has been a fantastic episode. You can go listen to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and any of those other places that you like to consume podcast content. That's our show for this week. And until next time, have a great one.
Take care.